Hello, everyone. My name is Tamiko Robinson Steele. I am a wife, mom, actor, and performance coach based in Nashville. Had the pleasure of working with both Denise and Jim. Jim more recently in a staged Zoom reading of Lady Balthazar by the lovely Jenna Hoban. And Denise in a great many number of things. We shared the stage in Midsummer Night's Dream in Summer Shakes a few years ago. And she was also my fearless leader in my Nashville Shakespeare Festival debut in 12th Night. So yes, hello y'all. I do want to mention that this program is supported by the Metro Nashville Arts Commission, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and Jackson Life. So tonight we're going to be talking about Directing Shakespeare with Jim Warren and Denise Hicks, and we'll then move on to questions that we've already gathered from people who sent them in, and also feel free to pop questions in the chat message box, and I'll be filtering those as we're going. But first, allow me to introduce Denise Hicks, Executive Artistic Director of the Nashville Shakespeare Festival. She has been working for the Nashville Shakespeare Festival since 1990 as an actor, director, teaching artist, and administrator. Raised in Lanai, Pennsylvania, she made her stage debut at the tender age of 5. Educated at Point Park University in Pittsburgh, and she moved to Nashville in 1980 to perform at Opryland, USA. Do y'all remember Opryland, USA? Yes, yes, yes. Denise was an original company member of the Tennessee Repertory Theater and was among the founders of both the Dark Horse Theater and People's Branch Theater. An Ingram Fellowship Award winner, she has edited, directed, and acted in over 60 productions of Shakespeare's works, developed and facilitated workshops for students of all ages, and designed and implemented the NSF Apprentice Company Training Program, Shakespeare Aloud, and Pop Upright Shakespeare. She has been a guest lecturer at many universities and with the Cooperative Center for Study Abroad program for 3 weeks in Stratford-upon-Avon and London. And she has also been a teaching artist for the Leonard Bernstein Center, Nashville Institute for the Arts, the Folger Shakespeare Library Institute, and TPAC Ed. In 2014, the Nashville Shakespeare Festival was chosen as one of 14 Shakespeare producers in North America to be a part of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, Shakespeare on the Road. That project included a visit from the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust to see her Depression-era inspired As You Like It and inclusion in a documentary and archive, which is really cool. She was honored by the Nashville Scene as one of the 25 Nashvillians who shaped the city for the better since 1989 and has frequently been voted Best Stage Actor by the readers of Nashville Scene. Yes, yes, yes. Everybody give it up for Denise Hicks. And next we have the amazing Jim Warren. Jim Warren is the founding artistic director of the American Shakespeare Center. He directed a total of 128 ASC productions, including 32 of Shakespeare's 38 plays, as well as produced and cast over 280 shows during his tenure. He grew the ASC annual touring scope to include 47 states, 1 U.S. territory, and 6 countries. In 2001, the ASC opened the Blackfriars Playhouse, the world's only recreation of Shakespeare's indoor theater. Before retiring from the ASC in 2017, Jim created Shakespeare's New Contemporaries, a groundbreaking undertaking to develop a new canon of 38 plays that are inspired by and in conversation with Shakespeare's work. After a 29-year run of guiding the ASC from scrappy startup to international acclaim, go Jim, Jim is pursuing new opportunities as a consultant, director, and educator while writing a book about the first 3 decades of the bellwether company he started. He is a member of the Theater Communications Group and Shakespeare Theater Association, who now enjoys traveling the country, making art, sharing his experience and expertise, and empowering a new generation of actors to explore the text and make the most of every moment. Now, because Jim and Denise connected and became quick friends, Jim joined the team at Nashville Shakes as a consultant in 2018 and has returned to direct NSF Pop Upright Henry VI, Part 1, an actor touring Rome Romeo and Juliet, and NSF's first holiday show, Every Christmas Story Ever Told. Before the pandemic shut everything down, Jim was prepping to direct the NSF Summer Shakespeare 2020 production of What You Will or Twelfth Night, with new music written by Nashville songwriters. How sad. Everyone say hello to Jim Warren.
Woo.
Now, we are going to get this ball rolling, beginning with a few questions that was sent in, like I said earlier. But first, Denise and Jim, I want you to say hi to the peoples out there.
Hi to the peoples out there.
Hi, people.
We are really, I was just talking about how this is just a little taste of society, of like touching in with our people, checking in, I guess, touching base, checking in. Thanks for coming. We're lonely.
I see Mary McDermott there. Hi, Mary McDermott. And I see lots of names of lots of people. So this is awesome.
Hello. I was trying to get the TV to show the baseball game for my husband, and I broke all the TVs, and I said, I'm sorry, but I have to go do this thing. So.
Well, we're glad you're here. All right, so we are just going to hop right on in. One of the first questions, I think Jim posed this question, but both of you feel free to answer. What do you like most and what do you like least about directing Shakespeare?
Those are huge questions, aren't they now? What do I like most about it? It is the unlimited creativity required to take this glorious poetry from page to life. That's what I love most about it. Is it what do I love least?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the limitations that reality puts on me. Mm-hmm. Because every production that I dream of is only about 50% realized for what it actually could be if the world weren't such a dense place and money wasn't so finite and things like that. So I think maybe that means I love and dislike the same thing about Shakespeare, is that it seems to be unlimited.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What's funny is that in signing up for this, the way that I needed to, it said type in a question. So I thought I had to type in a question to get admitted. And so it's so funny that you give that question, because one of the things I should say up front is I can't stand superlatives. So here I am. I submitted a question that was about most and least. I just think he's the greatest playwright. I just think that the stuff that he wrote 400 years ago is still relevant today, because he was able to tap into a part of humanity that doesn't change. And so I feel like when we go to Shakespeare, we get to see ourselves, our communities, our families, our friends, our politicians. We get to see people who we want to be and who we don't want to be. So trying to bring all that to life with every chunk that he gives us with every play is, I think, one of the never-ending challenges as a director. I think that his work is the best. So getting to delve into that and try to reveal that stuff and try to show an audience how accessible his stuff is a great joy, and the best joy that I've found in terms of directing. In terms of least, what I don't like directing about Shakespeare, almost nothing. I just love directing Shakespeare. We'll get into some other stuff that might deal with. I think the most difficult thing is Shakespeare. People being afraid of Shakespeare, and whether or not that's actors who haven't been able to do as much Shakespeare, or teachers who are struggling to teach Shakespeare, or students who are forced to see Shakespeare because they're told this is the greatest thing ever, and this is your Brussels sprouts and your spinach, and they don't have a taste for it yet. But I also see those things as wonderful challenges to get to explore as a director.
I love that you said the Shakespeare, because it seems it doesn't seem accessible to some people because they feel like I just don't understand. And I was definitely one of those people. I didn't have access to any type of Shakespeare training, or we may have read like Romeo and Juliet and maybe one other show like coming up in my K through 12. And it just didn't seem, I couldn't connect because I didn't, the language barrier, and it just seemed like someone was speaking French. And it wasn't until you get someone who can break down for you or help share in that experience that it becomes this whole other gem. And I have such an appreciation for Shakespeare now that I wish that I found years earlier. So yeah. Thank you, guys. All right, so now this is kind of a question that's like smushed together in a couple of different parts because they're both dealing with time. And so here it is. It says, how do you decide to cut the play to fit the time frame? So if you're doing summer shakes, you may only have 2 hours to keep the people there. So how do you decide how to cut the play to fit the time frame or the story that you want to tell, Hamlet with or without Fortinbras, or for instance, and how do you decide what parts of Shakespeare's verse need to be cut in order to make dialogue understandable and keep the pace of the play moving? So that's a lot in one.
You know, I don't think you ever really have to cut it to make it understandable. I feel like if we have all the time in the world, and the actors know what they're saying, they can make it understandable. And that's just that. We do, Nashville Shakes tends to cut things mostly because of our 10 a.m. matinees, like the buses have to leave, you know, the kids got to be back on the bus and back to school by noon. So we do try to do a 2 hour cut for that. And the same thing in the summertime, we like sending people home, you know, by 9:30 or so. So we agreed last year to start earlier just so that we would have a little more room on the later end of our show. But anyway, all that to say, what I do is read the play and then cut what I feel like, you know, and Jim can talk more specifically to the actual history of Shakespeare was redundant in his plays because his audiences were coming and going. So there were times when he had to do a recap for the people that might have stepped out or something in the first act. We hear those recaps. And I find that for a modern audience who are sitting and watching the whole show all together, they don't need those recaps. So I started to cut some of what I perceive to be redundancies unless, you know, they're absolutely necessary because a character is harping on a certain point or something like that. So, and then I found one of the most difficult plays to cut was Love's Labor's Lost because the whole dang thing rhymes. And so it's really, really hard to keep the meaning of the speech and cut it because you're cutting rhymes. And I feel like Shakespeare, the poet, you know, made all of those things rhyme because they needed to. So I feel like rhyming plays are harder to cut than some of the later plays that were getting a little jazzy. But I also, and I'll let Jim answer the rest of this, I also cut for if something is so, archaic humor that just doesn't ring for me. If I cannot really say, this is just not funny anymore because there's so much about this particular speech that we don't understand, I'll take it out. And I'll also cut to modern comedic sensibilities, which means sometimes Shakespeare's punchline comes 2 lines before the end of the speech. So I might cut the end of those last 2 so we can hit a punchline, get the laugh, move ahead. Is that take it away?
I should do this blanket statement up front. That term Shakespeare, I am stealing from the gentleman that I started the American Shakespeare Center with, who's a Shakespeare scholar named Ralph Cohen. So I'm giving Ralph credit up front, and now from here on out, anything that I steal from him, I will take as my own. But because Ralph was a Shakespeare scholar from the English side of the tracks, and I was a theater and an English major in college, we started this company together to try to recreate Shakespeare staging conditions. So there's a level of Shakespeare geekery in my bones from 30 years of doing this. And because my touring company that went to all those states and all those countries, they went that far because of the Shakespeare Mafia, because of, Shakespeare professors. So that is all preface to this piece of geekery. I'm convinced that Shakespeare cut his plays, that we've got enough evidence, we've got enough different versions of his plays to see that what we have in the first folio might not have been what was ever performed on stage. Andrew Gurr, who was the Shakespeare scholar who was with Sam Wanamaker in the creation of the Globe Theatre in London, the New Globe in London, new as in the 1990s. Andrew Gurr talks about a maximal text, and he usually points to what we have in the first folio is a maximal text. And he thinks that what we have in earlier printings of those plays, some plays that were printed in quartos before that first folio was released, he thinks those might have been the performance scripts. And so if you want to pick up a great script, get the New Cambridge Henry V that is edited by Andrew Gurr, and all of this preface material, he lays this stuff out. Romeo and Juliet, the prologue talks about 2 hours traffic of our stage. That speech does not appear in different versions of the play. You can't do Romeo and Juliet in 2 hours if you do the whole thing that we have. And so I think that Shakespeare cut his plays, that what gets presented as this full text perhaps was never performed that way. And so it's like, I think the modern equivalent is we've got the director's cut that would never saw the light of day in the movie theaters, but it's the whole thing. So I think 2 hours traffic of our stage is about right. That's just about right for modern butts as it was for early modern butts. That folks, much longer than that, you're going to have trouble keeping folks' attention. So trying to find ways to trim things, all those specifics that Denise said are great places to start. What I personally try to do is I try to rarely cut a whole character out of a play. I try rarely to cut a whole scene out of a play. What I try to do is using the term liposuction instead of amputation. And it's usually not to create a different take on the play. Hamlet, for example, people will cut because it is the longest. It is a white elephant. It is longer than anything else in the darn period. But it, I think by design, is a political play, is a family play, is a mystery play. And if you cut any of those things out to make it shorter, if you cut Fortinbras, I think you're missing something important. I try to trim a little bit here, a little bit there in a way that will add up to enough that is off the table so that we are at about 2 hours. And I think all of Shakespeare's plays can be done that way. And you can leave in the stuff that's famous for those folks that want those famous lines. Yeah. But I think trying to trim a little bit here and there is a much better way of preserving the overall story and yet trying to limit the amount of time that audiences especially modern audiences, are sitting on their butts watching. But I don't think modern folks are any different than folks 400 years ago. I think we all have, as a matter of fact, our attention spans today might be, less because of our devices and all the other things that we have available to us. But
yeah, first, yes, they are.
Did I answer the different pieces of that question?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. And I just want to remind all of the people who are watching to pop any questions that you may have. It's a little chat at the bottom of your screen, and just click on that and we'll get the message. So if you have any questions and we don't get to them, if I'm not, they're not included in what I'm asking, just add them in there. All right, guys, next question. How does directing change the differences in the period settings for the plays? Do you change the pacing of the dialogue? What is your approach to choosing the setting for your plays? What's your process?
You can go first this time, Jim. I went first last time.
Okay.
Caring is caring, Dee.
That's very sweet, but now I'm going to get sacrilegious. I work really, really hard to not create a concept for any Shakespeare play that I'm directing. I try to not create another layer of story to put on top of what Shakespeare wrote. And so I'll costume any show in any different era that you want to costume it. I'll have a show that looks like, medieval times, or something that looks like it's in some future time, and everything in between. But I don't want to get specific enough. The example that I use all the time is I don't want to set Romeo and Juliet in 1972 Miami Beach disco era as the feud between the Montague dance group and the Capulet dance group. That might make a great story with a great disco ball, and you can create a great production that way, but that's the kind of layering that I don't want to do. So I'm okay with anybody who wants to do that and create a great show. It's not my jam. It's not the thing that I want to do. But whatever the costumes look like, whatever period is evoked by the costumes, I don't change anything in the text or about the approach to the text to be more modern or more Elizabethan or more Roman or whatever that look is. I don't do anything that will give us that. And I think that part of what I take my cue from is the plays themselves are filled with anachronisms from Shakespeare's time. So that Shakespeare often sets a play in a particular location and then has nothing about that location in the play.
So one of our audiences actually asked, please discuss how you deal with anachronisms in the play when you play something in the modern day.
Well, I think that anachronisms were built into the plays for Shakespeare's audience. So a play like Julius Caesar that takes place in ancient Rome has lines in it about doublets and hose and hats and things that were part of contemporary Elizabethan clothing that were not a part of ancient Rome. So, and I think the evidence points to Shakespeare's company probably did not dress in Roman clothes for a Roman play or in Italian clothes for an Italian play. Everything, I think, felt like it was here and now and modern for his audience. So even if you want to be a purist and say, I want to do it the way Shakespeare did it, does that mean you're going to wear Elizabethan clothes, or does that mean you're going to wear clothes from 2020? So I think that's another really geeky, scholarly reason to costume in any darn way you want to. But certainly the way that the show looks, or if we want to use the term concept or setting, that wouldn't change my approach to how we direct the scenes. I think that Shakespeare's writing is so good that if we crawl inside of it and we crawl inside each scene, we can show that it is relevant to a modern audience, whatever look we've created for it, and whatever that setting might evoke for somebody.
Nice.
Especially, I think that's true because of relationships. It's so, Shakespeare is so masterful about the way he created characters who interrelate the way that fathers and daughters do, and friends and people you trust and people who you cannot trust. And so I feel like relationships between human beings have not changed much since the beginning of history. So I feel like that's the truth that we can find no matter how and when we set the plays. I do tend to, you mentioned in the intro, Tamiko, the Depression era, as you like it. Like what we did was we set that in Tennessee during the Depression, and they were putting on a play because that's what people did to entertain themselves when they had no TVs and radios and no money. Let's do a Shakespeare play. So, but what setting it in a particular era did inform was the music, and it gave us a real specific musical style that then David Olney, who wrote much of that music, and Stan Lawrence were composing based in the 1930s, 20s, 30s style of music, and that really helped them. Like it just gave them some guidance. But back to Jim's point is that when you're playing, Rosalind, she falls in love just like a woman from any time across the history of human beings might immediately fall in love with Orlando, and he with her. So it doesn't matter what they're wearing. The course of true love never did run smooth. Never.
Quotables. All right, so next question is, how do you reach people outside of your network for or your immediate network for productions? Are you conscious about representation when auditioning and then casting for shows?
Nashville Shakes, we tend to, what I always tell out-of-towners is we don't have housing or transportation or anything for out-of-towners because our priority is to keep our locals employed, but we welcome newcomers with open arms, and sometimes we help them find housing and transportation and do what we can because we love getting new actors here. But our primary concern is keeping our locals employed and keeping our local casting pool healthy and well-fed, and keeping their dogs fed and children growing and everything. Nashville Shakes tends to be a very Nashville focused company. Jim has really helped me see that, there is a world elsewhere.
Is there really?
Coriolanus, for anybody who's keeping score.
I usually quote things like that. It must be this yerba mate in my so that when we went to UPTAs and we met so many glorious people from across the country, I was really excited about bringing new people to Nashville. But it really comes down to when somebody gives us a certain donation, I don't want to give that to Budget Rent-A-Car or United Airlines or something. I really want to put it in actors' pockets. So having a Nashville-focused company, both culturally, because I feel like the culture of a company comes from within the community, and financially, I kind of am Nashville-centric. I don't know if that's the answer they want to hear. What do you say, Jim?
Well, with the 30 years that I spent with my own company, we were in this tiny little nowhere town in the middle of the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. So we started with student actors who were, doing this. James Madison University is where I went to school, where I met the Shakespeare professor that I started the company with. And we used mostly JMU students or people from Harrisonburg, Virginia, for the first 1, 2, 3 years. And so we weren't in a city that had lots of folks. I didn't have any ambition to create, to go from a $500 budget in our first year to a $4 million budget when I left, I had no aspiration to do that. All I wanted to do was say, hey, everybody, Shakespeare's really cool when you perform it like this. Mm-hmm. And so to do that and to go to wherever anybody would have us, and those early days were can we please come and sleep on your gymnasium floor in sleeping bags and perform for your students in the morning? It was, for me to keep that going, I knew I needed to get people who were available full time. So that was the biggest jump when I went from having students who were local to, if I'm available full time, I can sell us full time. And that was a big leap that would kill a lot of companies. And luckily I was able to book the company, enough to pay for that. Mm-hmm. But the first thing that I did was get housing, that housing was a part of the contract because I needed to bring people in to be full-time professional actors because I did not have a local pool. So that kind of is a different center and a different place of growth that I went through, because even though we paid nothing plus housing for a good number of years. But I want to get to the heart of that the other part of that question, which you talked about representation. What was the phrasing of that question, Tamiko?
Yeah, so it was just saying, are you conscious about representation when auditioning potential actors and then casting?
Yeah, and I apologize for the soapbox that's going to come, but this is too important to not address. Two things that have been on my mind a lot recently. I'm wearing this shirt, Strong Like a Girl. I'm wearing this hat, Black Lives Matter. Our American theater scene sucks in a whole lot of ways. We have to change it from the ground up. And we need to use this pandemic that has shut everything down as an opportunity to rebuild it differently in huge ways. And the three big things that are on my list right now are: we need more women in Shakespeare. We need women who can play any darn part in Shakespeare. And women can do that without having to wear a dress, without having to change the pronouns. Women can play any role in Shakespeare. Black, Indigenous, people of color actors can play anything in Shakespeare. And it's not happening. And I want to admit to everybody who's watching, I'm looking right at the dot. I haven't been good enough. I haven't done everything that I can do to make those two things happen as a normal part of everything that goes on a stage that I'm responsible for. And I want to take it a step further. In addition to those things as part of the casting ideas and what actors can do what roles, I don't even want to go into casting thinking this particular role is going to be a person of color or this particular role is going to be a woman. I want every role to be open to whomever I can find that I think are the best actors to play those roles. And I got to do better at finding great women and great people of color to play these roles. On top of that, I also think that the other place that our industry has to change is in our offices, from development, marketing, box office, every artistic directors, marketing directors. We need more women. We need more people of color. And I'm an old white guy saying that. I'm an old white guy who is part of the problem because it's old white guys that have been dominating our industry and screwing it up, as far as I'm concerned. That we need changes from the whole darn thing. And we need to get to a place where the artists are the center of our businesses, which is not true either. We need to return to a company model. We need to be paying actors full time and not just people who work in the office. We need to rethink how we do theater, because now we can. Now nobody is doing theater. I mean, there's a couple of tiny exceptions, but for the most part, the industry's gone. So what's going to come back? When we had to rebuild from the Great Recession, some companies died. Most everybody else cut back, and they rebuilt to be just like they were before. Mm-hmm. They didn't use that as an opportunity to be smarter financially, to be smarter in any of the ways that I'm talking about right now, not at all. And so I think we need a revolution. I think we need radical change so that we are going out and not just saying, hey, women and people of color who have not been represented on the classical stage, please come to our auditions. We've been doing that. That's not good enough. We got to work harder to get more people on our stages that represent the wide audiences that Shakespeare can and should connect to. Okay, so sorry, I just did a whole lot of yelling.
Somebody said Jim for president.
So I don't know if I answered that question well enough, but that's my answer.
Yes. I appreciate that. And it is, it's really good to, as an actor of color, as a Black woman in this industry, in this community, to hear that. And I always appreciate when my peers acknowledge and are vocal about things like this, things that may not affect them personally, but will definitely be for the betterment of us as a community and as a whole. So thank you, Jim.
Everybody's writing statements. Everybody's talking a talk.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to walk it? Who's going to do it?
We are, Jim, and thank you. And your encouragement and your counsel and your partnership in all of this has been really, really appreciated. But Nashville Shakes is ready to do better and step up and lead the way. So just you wait till 2021, y'all.
Just you wait.
We have some really major changes and big plans that we will be announcing in August.
Awesome. Excited. All right. So just to kind of piggyback off of that, it's a question that's, it says, how do you appropriately address, edit, cut the derogatory racial and religious stereotypes? And in addition to that, in light of the recent forces for needed racial awareness and change, how can we discover the lines with Shakespeare in terms of honoring his artistry while cutting derisive and racist comments, themes, or characters?
Denise, I just talked for so long. You should talk first.
Yeah, I have, because, so I did, the first time I directed Shakespeare was back in the early 90s. And that, I think my very, very first directing gig was a sampler of Macbeth. And we had 4 actors, 2 white and 2 black actors in that play. And it wasn't hard at all. You encounter a word that does not ring well with everybody at the table, and you cut it or change it. And that's just that. I feel like we as super sensitive artists, especially when you have representation at the table and in the process, everybody speaks up and says, well, that doesn't sound right, or I don't like that the tone of that particular line. You cut it or change it. Shakespeare's dead, and he changed things all the time, and he was cutting and changing, and his actors seemed to have plenty of input as well into what they were saying and doing. So This was all about directing Shakespeare. I feel like we have gone into artistic directing for a company, but back to that first day of sitting at the table with everybody in their pencils and scripts. I've always been a really collaborative director and listened to the actors and listened to the sensitivity, and the stage manager and the props person, and everybody else is always welcome, and scholars at our table to say, this, she hangs like a jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Is this use of Ethiop appropriate or no? Is he actually saying that an Ethiopian is unattractive or beautiful? So we have always, when we have encountered words or terms or for the characters that are inappropriate to other people, there are times when villains, you don't want to take Iago's racism away from him, because we need to see that. We need to see his villainy in action. And I feel like Shakespeare was kind of leaning into some of those issues of the of people's cruelty to each other, and the way that that kind of discrimination and or abuse of power can ruin a life. Those things are so clearly illustrated. That's what theater is all about. My mom told me when I was really young, there will be times when you have to play the bad guy, and you have to do that because people need to see, you put it on stage, turn the lights on it, and give people some sense of what's good and what is inappropriate. So I have felt like the language, the inappropriate language or language that makes people uncomfortable or hurtful language, we have always just cut it or changed it and dealt with it. I feel like as an artist, here I am, 45 years into my career, I'm learning more every day. And there were recently one of our colleagues through the Shakespeare Theater Association posted a really pretty comprehensive list of offensive language in Shakespeare. And some of it, I have to say, I had missed, because I was like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that connotation of dark might be hurtful to a person with darker skin. So I'm still learning, I'm still cutting, and still really grateful for the collaborative process that brings people of different perspectives together to teach each other, to learn that we can then put that on stage and share with a greater audience.
Yeah, it definitely makes for a fuller experience, I think, or when I've been a part of such collaborations, there's no comparison. So, Jim, what about you?
Well, we need more collaboration in our industry all the way through it. So that's I think a huge part of the revolution. Yes to everything that Denise said, and in addition to that, Shakespeare was so good at what he was trying to do that there are plays where I think he is deliberately bringing up race in positive and negative ways. I think that he was ahead of his time in how he did some of that. And it's complex. Let's take Merchant of Venice. The single black character that is written into the Merchant of Venice is the Prince of Morocco, who gives an incredible speech, one of the most amazing speeches ever written, about how glorious his skin color is. The poetry in that says, man, I am dark because I am close to the sun. I am kissed by the sun and the gods, and I love my color. He chooses the wrong casket. He doesn't get to marry Portia. After he leaves, Portia, who is the heroine of the show, says, "May all of his complexion choose me so." Portia's a racist. You can't cut that line, in my opinion. And you have to create a world where, in my opinion, Shakespeare knew what he was doing. Shakespeare didn't make this dark-skinned character a comic throwaway part. He made that man noble in his short scene, and our hero says, "I don't want him because he's black." And to me, that's genius writing. It's complicated writing. It's messy humanity. No character before Shakespeare wrote The Merchant of Venice, no character had appeared on the English-speaking stage who was Jewish that was as three-dimensional as Shylock. Barabbas in The Jew of Malta came before what Shakespeare wrote. And I think Shakespeare gives us so much more. I mean, prior to Shakespeare writing, Jewish characters were comic villain foils, and they were two-dimensional. Shakespeare makes Shylock, and I apologize to our viewing audience for my language, Shylock at times is an asshole. He gives, however, the most beautiful speech about, "If you prick us, do we not bleed?" He gives a whole speech by this master playwright about humanity. And even though I'm a Jew, aren't I human too? And so I think that there are racial and cultural things going on in Shakespeare's plays that sometimes might get cut because nobody wants to deal with that messiness. I think we should deal with that messiness. At the same time, I don't want to whitewash Shakespeare and cleanse him from his own racist culture. Is the patriarchy. I mean, the most powerful people in Shakespeare's life, for the most part of his life, were a queen, a female ruler of his country, and his wife, who was older than he was. I think he writes more humanity into women than any of those writers at the time. I think Shakespeare was enlightened for his period in a lot of ways about women. But we're talking about that imagery. Black is bad, white is good. That happens all throughout his plays. I think it happens more in Othello on purpose, because I think he's drawing certain things about black being bad and white being good for different reasons in that play. But I'd say that is a thing in his poetry, in his art, that runs through his plays that I think sometimes gets to a place where that just sounds like our own contemporary culture. There are things that we used to say that we should not be saying. I think that there are things that Shakespeare says that the one that comes to my mind that was one of the first things that I changed every darn time I did the play. Benedict says, and if I don't love her, I'm a Jew. In a comedy. To me, that's problematic in that racist culture that I've changed the word Jew to fool every time I've done that play. And to me, that is an example of, all right, Shakespeare can be racist in his language, not for a purpose, where so many other times I think characters are racist on purpose, and that there are racial issues being dealt with in a purposeful way. But then there are other times where I think, no, that's a product of stuff that we should not be putting on stage. And that's a pretty fine line. This is advanced placement stuff. It is not easy. You can't just say, I'm going to cut anything that is racially insensitive. You've got to look at each thing and try to figure out why it's there. Should it be changed? Should it not be changed? We can't change things, in my opinion, willy-nilly. But we should be thinking really hard about all of that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's talk about cross-gender casting. One of our lovely friends sent in, they said, not the guys playing women for laughs. Jim, we kind of talked about this during our the Lady Balthazar reading a little bit. This person says, and I quote, "I want female Hamlets and Othellos," end quote. What someone else said related to the discussion on diversity regarding women and BIPOC, what are your thoughts on incorporating LGBTQ plus themes in new and visible ways?
Denise?
Okay. I start with these plays as a story. What story are we telling? Mm-hmm. And then what are the characters in the stories that tell the stories? How do we, who do I need to cast, right? I have, as an actor, my whole life, I never considered anything out of my reach. So I didn't ever consider that it was not appropriate when I was younger, or and just recently I played the Duke of York, and it was the first time I ever had a crush on the character I was playing. So actors are shapeshifters. They can be anything. They can convey anything to the audience. That's their job. So I have qualities in mind of characters. You know, there are archetypes, perhaps you might call them. I'm not sure if that's the right word or not. But for instance, I had an idea of of Horatio, right? Horatio is one of my favorite characters when I was casting Hamlet not too long ago. And I had a really good idea of, now who is this Horatio? As I was zeroing in on who I was going to cast as Hamlet, I had the qualities in mind of what I needed for Horatio. And in walked Melinda Seawalk, who had all of those qualities. She happens to be a Black actress, her female actor, and she had all of the qualities I was looking for Horatio. So I cast her, and she asked me, "Why did you cast me? What about it?" And I said, "It was just you. If I were dying, I would want to die in your arms. I would want you to be the last person that I speak to, as you know, for Hamlet." I wanted to give him the gift of this particular Horatio, which was just a really huge-hearted, patient, present human being, happened to be a Black woman playing that role. We got a little pushback from some of our conservative audience members who said, how can Hamlet's best friend be a Black woman? And we didn't change pronouns, so we addressed that moving into the LGBTQ realm. We didn't change pronouns. We said this Horatio, has feminine qualities but prefers male pronouns, and that's just who that character is. And Melinda was good with that. I mean, she fell right into place with it, and all of the characters who addressed Horatio understood that although Melinda had her hair tied up and she was clearly a person with some feminine qualities, she was someone who preferred, or that person was someone who preferred male pronouns. So I feel like audiences, they'll go with you if you commit to telling the story, and if each actor commits to playing the character, anybody can play any role.
I often find as an audience member that when I come into a show that is non-traditionally cast, and I see just a difference that I've never seen before, or like say I saw Melinda in that role, you clock, she is a woman and she is Black, and you clock it, and then the story gets to rolling, and it matters not anymore. No, and for the majority of the people that I speak with, they have that same feeling. Like you clock it, and then it doesn't matter anymore. The story is being told, and you're wrapped up in that. Yeah.
I think that happens a lot, Tamiko, for a whole lot of folks. And I think the other thing that can happen in that same circumstance is a young Black woman watches that and does more than just clock it, but she's like, wow, I haven't seen that before. I can do that.
I have to tell you that in 12th Night, which was my first NSF show, had no idea what I was doing. I was the happiest person to be there, and it's still one of the best experiences I've had on a stage and with that group of people. But I cannot tell you how many young Black women still come up to me today who came with their schools and say, "Oh my God, you were the Black princess," and like that is they remember that, they remember the story surrounding that, and the position that I was placed in. Because oftentimes when like I would go to shows when I was younger, it would be an all-white cast, and there was no representation. Representation is so important for, I had a friend who they took a youth group to the ballet. This is completely related but unrelated, but they took a youth group to the ballet, and a young girl, a young Black girl, my friend is a white woman, and a young Black girl was sitting next to her. She was about 8 or 9. And the Black ballerina who's retiring from the Nashville Ballet, Kayla Browser, who's a phenomenal dancer, BT Dub. But Kayla was on the stage, and this little Black girl sees Kayla on the stage, turns to my friend and says, "Oh, so I can do ballet?" And like turns back and watches the show. It had never dawned on her that she could be a ballerina because she had never seen anyone who looked like herself.
Well, and you getting to play Olivia, not only a Black woman performing Shakespeare, but to be the highest status in the play next to the high status guy is another huge thing that we need to do more of, so that it's not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. It still is a big deal. So we should consciously be trying to cast in a way that folks can see that. Shakespeare, that's why he's so good, is that even though he was not writing for a Black audience, man, Black people can see themselves in Shakespeare the way white people can see themselves in Shakespeare, the way all different kinds of people can see themselves. That's what great art is. And so back to the women Hamlets and women Othellos, I'm not as big a fan of Lady Hamlet and changing all the pronouns to be Princess Hamlet. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons, and I had to think about this a lot with one of the gigs I've did recently, where they would cast women, and I had women in my cast, didn't realize how hardcore they were with this particular principle until somebody had to drop out. A guy that was cast to be Malvolio had to leave, and I wanted somebody that was already in my cast to play that role, who happened to be a female actor. What this place's norm was we can put women in any role, but we have to change all the pronouns and they have to wear a dress. And they thought, and you know, this is a place that had been around for 1 billion years, they thought they were doing women a service, because if women came from places where women actors were being forced to play guys because they didn't have enough guys, they thought it was demeaning to women to not make them wear a dress and change the pronouns. And I think it's the reverse. So yeah. I think that if a woman plays Hamlet, like you said, and some people are going to clock it, and then they're not going to care. Other people are going to watch it from I am so much more into this because I know that's a woman playing it, you're going to get all the reverberations that you would get by changing the pronouns without changing the pronouns. You know, that I think that you will see things in Hamlet because a woman's playing the role that you wouldn't necessarily see. You're gonna think thoughts that you might not normally think, and you don't have to change anything to do that. And I would go so far with my costumer and say, we don't even need to hide if it fits in the conceit. We don't even have to hide the fact that she's a woman. We can dress her in a way that, you know, shows anything off that we want to show off. We don't have to, you know, overly butch somebody up. And that gets back to the LGBTQ community as well, in that I would want to put anybody of any gender in a role that I thought would be great in that role without trying to shove a concept or a point of view on that. If there is an, you know, openly gay, flamboyant actor playing a particular role, if that fits the story, okay, great. It might not fit the story, and that particular actor has in their bag of tricks something that is different than who they are off stage. That's great too. I mean, I feel like Shakespeare is so expansive that there's room for everybody, and that nobody should be denied a shot at a role because they check particular boxes that a director then says, I can't have any of those boxes in those roles. Now, it could be that you're a really talented actor who I just don't feel is right for this particular part, no matter your gender or your color or, you know, anything. But I don't think anything should be off the table. And again, I think the more inclusive we can be on the stage, backstage, in our offices, then the more audiences who are that varied will be able to see themselves on the stage and part of the company in ways that are just sorely lacking right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's a question, changing topics here. If you could direct any Shakespeare play without financial limitations and barriers, which one would it be? If you would have a concept, and why does that particular show speak to you personally?
You want me to go first, Denise? Because I've been making you go first because I've been talking so much.
Okay.
Do you want to go first? You want me to? Your call.
You go.
Okay. I'm going to cheat. I would direct Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, and Henry VI Part 3. Those three plays, in my opinion, should not be conflated. They are all three brilliant pieces of work that speak to today's politics in America and across the globe. They're filled with great characters, and I don't think that in Shakespeare's lifetime, when they were performed, they were ever called Henry VI Part whatever. Those titles did not come into play until 1623, which is years after Shakespeare was dead, and the printing of the first folio. That's the first time that we saw those titles. They had long titles that were different. I directed two of them. I directed Part 1 and Part 2 for the American Shakespeare Center, and had plans to direct Part 3, but then I retired before I got to do that, and I changed the names. It was Joan of Arc, in parentheses, Henry VI Part 1. The Rise of Queen Margaret, Henry VI Part 2. The Fall of King Henry, Henry VI Part 3. I think that those plays aren't done because especially in America, because most Americans think they're going to be dry, dusty history plays that they will not, about English history, that they won't be able to follow. And I just think they are so darn good. They have fights. They have dirty jokes. They have glorious, colorful characters. And And so that's the show I would direct if I could.
And I'm gonna be in it. I have a, I guess I'll tell my secrets, right? I have a 12th night that I want to, I had the fortune to go to see Sleep No More in New York, thanks to some friends, really good
So
friends.
jealous.
And got really fired up about creating a interactive and immersive 12th night in that way. Except I would do the whole play in a restaurant with multiple floors, the bar where Andrew and Toby hang out and drink and then there's like sort of the middle ground, and then upstairs is Olivia's, and it's beautiful up there. But I would really love to do an immersive party and call it Illyria, and have it just be an ongoing sort of follow your own story, so that all of the actors who, when they are not actually in the play, you can follow Malvolio home and watch him dress up in Olivia's clothes when she's not looking, right? Or discover her brother up in the attic. Everybody thought he died. So, but I really had, it's not that it's something that could happen. It's something that could happen here in Nashville, and but it would cost so much money. But it could also make a lot of money. So if anybody is watching, and I really loved. There's an old hotel that was converted into a restaurant where we did one of our pop-ups in 2018. And that's where I was like, this is the setting. This is the perfect place. You can have dinner with Olivia if when she's not actually, before Viola shows up. I mean, that play has so much going on off stage that I think it would be a multi-visit experience for people to come and follow the different characters. So that's what I would do.
That sounds awesome.
Sounds really cool. Okay, so we have a question. We have a couple of, I think, teachers that are here participating. What beginning steps would you give to a new Shakespeare director? What are things that you've now learned that you wish you'd known when you had your first few passes at directing Shakespeare?
I think you can never do too much table work. I'm really adamant about really pouring through it word by word. I know I do as a director, and I know that actors do on their own role, but I really feel like sitting at the table for a good solid week of everybody learning the whole story and really understanding well what their role is in it and how they can support, the actual structure of the story. Then when we get up on our feet and start playing, we have just so much more confidence about what we're saying, why we're saying it, and what many of our options might be. I totally believe in don't make any decisions at the table, but really understand all of your options based on the text.
Yeah. I would, Denise, like when we would do table work, like for example, the 12th night, when we did table work, you learn so much as the actor, because you go into those rehearsals sometimes and you're like, oh my God, I don't understand what this is, but you don't want to say anything because it may not be, you may not even be involved in the scene, but then your other collaborators, you hear new ideas on what they thought stories meant. You guys create a beautiful foundation of what the world is that you'll be sharing together. And I found that so helpful as an actor when we were able to do the table work and kind of have a base and then just get up and like be wrong and be okay. And then learn along the way.
I think that is great advice, and the two specifics that I would make part of the table work, something that I didn't come across until a few years into my company. I read an article in the Shakespeare Bulletin, which is a scholarly thing, but it had reviews of shows. And the great Shakespeare scholar Stephen Booth from University of California, Berkeley, wrote a review called The Best Othello I Ever Saw. And it was in this tiny theater in Colorado Springs, directed by the late Murray Ross. And Stephen goes on and on about, I've seen all this, and these people don't realize how great this show is. And I didn't know why the show was great until I talked to them. I found out that Murray Ross asked his actors in the early part of, after they got cast, to do paraphrasing of their lines, to do word-for-word substitution. And that was a big part of their table work. And I read about that and I thought, and I took that idea and I morphed it to be different than what Murray did. I ended up hiring Murray as a director because I wanted to see this, in front of me. But I stole the idea just from reading about it and applied it a little differently. But if you as an actor have to go through your text and find a word-for-word substitution for all the verbs, all the nouns, all the important words, and not change the syntax, use the syntax Shakespeare gives you, it allows an actor to own what Shakespeare has given you so much more. When Shakespeare's phrasing has the perfect word, my God, how can I find another word that means this? Because this has all these different meanings. And just the act of thinking that makes your performance richer when you do Shakespeare's words. And so I would add paraphrasing to that table work and verse surfing that go through every single line and pound it out to find out where the verse is regular, where it might be not regular. Why is it not regular? Where are their options? All these lines that are full of single syllable words that maybe aren't iambic. Maybe it starts with a trochee and then you get extra stresses. How do you explore the verse form as music that will help you internalize and deliver an actually more naturalistic performance? That's the other thing that as a young director, I wish I knew. The more you explore the verse, it sounds antithetical. It sounds wrong. It sounds like by exploring this technical thing, you actually find more internal truth. That if you know the rhythms of what he wrote and how he wrote that, it will end up, you will own it in a way that feels more natural because the iambic pentameter form, by and large, is heightened naturalism. And so knowing the words and knowing the rhythms, I think, are two things that we can do for folks on any level. And as a matter of fact, the younger you do it, the less set in your ways you are.
Let me tell you something. Yes.
Yeah.
The next step of that, I really feel like, is then improving through the show, improvising. I know I saw Ethan Jones here earlier. We improvised all the way through Hamlet. He played Polonius, and we made some really important discoveries because it personalized. It was maybe 2 weeks into rehearsal, maybe even a little more, when everybody was off book. They knew what they were doing, they knew what they were saying, but when I said, okay, you cannot use the Shakespeare, you've got to play it in your own words, we found some places where they were not sure what they were saying, where they were not sure what was going on. So some great discoveries were made, making sure that, reminding the actors that they're still actors, that improv is still the game. It's all yes and. It's all improvisation except for Shakespeare's words, which must be word for word. So I love Jim's technique of that paraphrasing with the syntax, and then just taking it one step more to personalizing it. By the time you get back to the actual verse again, you own it in a whole deeper, more true, more playful way.
For sure. So we have a couple of questions about accents, and I just want to say, as an actor who knew virtually nothing about Shakespeare, I should be embarrassed about some of my earlier auditions. I am not. I just assumed, because the only versions of Shakespeare that I saw was British actors, you know, on television or whatever. And so I just assumed that everything that you did, you had to do with that dialect, instead of bringing who you are and where you are to that. So here they are. These questions are, oh, I'm sorry, I lost it. These questions are coming soon. Oh, here they are. What is your practice regarding using accents along with non-American pronunciation in order to get the rhyme and scansion of lines? And what are your feelings about working with accents when they support the pronunciation of words that rhyme correctly?
The tricky thing with rhyme is that, and I talked about this with David Crystal, who David and his dad are part of this this good geeky underground movement called Original Pronunciation of Shakespeare, where they've gone into great depths and written books about here's how the Elizabethan accent in Shakespeare's London might have sounded, which is not like contemporary London, because it's a port city that has been influenced over the years. It actually sounds more like Appalachian communities that were settled by people who came over during Shakespeare's time and then were isolated. So there's a lot of funky vowels, and it's a mix of this Appalachian and Highland Scotland stuff. But anyway, as they came up with their thing, the thing that I talked to David about was there is sight rhyme in Shakespeare. Not everything is sound rhyme. And so to say that this must have been pronounced this way in Shakespeare's time because that would make the couplet rhyme, I don't think is a hard and set rule. I think that might be true. I tend to be, for as much of a annoying purist as I can sound like, I tend to be unpurist-y in that I often don't like hearing words that are part of our contemporary lexicon pronounced in a funky way just to fit the meter or just to hit a rhyme. But I'm probably inconsistent about that because there are times when I think it sounds, okay, I know that that's not how we would say it today, but there's something about it that sounds cooler when you say it like that. And sometimes it's two different actors could say the same word differently. You know, if they said it the same way, oh, it works for you, it doesn't work so well for you. So I'm not puritanical about trying to make everything rhyme.
That's kind of character based, don't you think, Jim? Like sometimes a character will intentionally mispronounce a word, or make a word rhyme with another word just because they think it sounds cool. The character,
right?
You know? So
right. No, I'll buy that.
The play, it's just the playfulness of it. We have here in Nashville, we have some dialects here. And they can be really musical in the when played through. Most of the time, I want people to speak the speech in their own voice, and so when that comes through in a dialect, and we have some people whose English is not their first language here as well, and that. I want to hear, how does this speech sound in your mouth, in your life? You know, bring yourself to it and play it for all it's worth. So I love to hear different dialects speak the speech.
Me too.
Shakespeare will write some dialects for some characters. You know, Llewellyn in Henry V, he speaks not with a Welsh accent, but with this made-up version of that. And it's phonetically in the writing. But I also don't want to hear the French characters in Henry V put on some kind of American version of a French accent, because that dialect is not written into it. Now, if I cast a French actor, then maybe that would be okay. But I want to hear I want to hear your voice.
That's good for all of you actors out there to know.
Don't do contemporary British accents with Shakespeare ever. You don't need it.
Lesson learned the hard way, guys. Okay, so I think we have enough for maybe 1.5 more questions. How do you find a balance between instructing the actors on what to do and letting them make discoveries for themselves? And do you find that it's different for every actor?
I think number one, you cast well. You cast, people to succeed. And then I do not, I have learned the longer I direct to step back and let them play, especially those first 2 weeks or so, and let them make their own discoveries, because I have a lot of faith in the people I cast, that they're going to find things I didn't even think about. And then maybe 2 weeks in, if I see that they're struggling, I'll throw in some suggestions. Try this, try that, or try something new. Love that. Let's see what else is there. But actors are so creative. And a lot of times I feel like they don't. I have more faith in their creativity than they do. So sometimes I'll push them to make new choices, and they are... and they cry. I hate to make them cry. But when I say, no, that was fine, just try something else. It's really because I feel, again, back to your very first question, Tamiko, it's that limitless factor in Shakespeare, is that when we think we've got it right, or when we think we know what a moment's about, it's time to honestly, knock down that door and see what's in the next room.
Mm-hmm.
I think that directing is a lot like managing, which is a lot like parenting, in that the harder you try to micromanage, the worse you are going to make the outcome. And that to me, the kind of leader that I want to work for, the kind of parent, sorry, mom and dad, the kind of parent that I want to parent me, I want to try to please the director, the manager, the parent, but I don't want to parrot them. That I want to find it for myself. So I think that what great directors do is that they help actors find stuff on their own that the director wanted them to find, in addition to being open to them finding stuff that they never even thought of.
Yeah.
But if I want my kid to do exactly what I want my kid to do, and I tell my kid, you do this, that, and the other, that is a great recipe for never getting anywhere close to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same is true for actors. And when you put on top of that all the language in Shakespeare and all the other stuff involved in it, what I found was that if you're going to do a long run, and I had actors, doing 3 shows for an entire year, that if you don't own your choices, they will not, if you're just doing what you've been told to do because you were told to do it, you will not be able to hold that, over a long run, which is the same thing with understanding the language and the verse and stuff. You may be able to get away with it and fake it for a little while, for a short run, but over the course of a long haul, man, you got to own it. And I think the best way to own it is, as the best leaders help people find stuff that without having to dictate it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both of you just said. From an actor standpoint, it's always been, I feel like that it's not an actor, you telling us this is what you want. It's not because we don't want to do that. It's just because we don't know how to get there yet. And for someone telling me or giving me the space or giving me the permission to explore and find things, like it's terrifying. But like you said, like the occurrence, like, oh my God, what if I've been to everything that I've done? Is it all a lie? so when I get that space, like it's a freak out at first, and then it's like, okay, well, just like go time. And the same thing I said before, when you are get some things wrong, you learn from that, and it's like, okay, so this is what I don't want to do, and so you can go in a different direction, and that may not be right either, but somewhere in the middle is where your truth lies. And I think with directors like yourselves, that it's very beneficial for the actor. So
well, and there'll be times when I'll say, oh wow, what you just did was wonderful. What were you thinking when you just did that? And then you tell me what you were thinking. And it is nowhere close to what I would say, hey, go in this direction. But I would say yes, because that produced something that was awesome. So you keep thinking that thing.
yeah.
And that's what a good outside eye can do for somebody, is say, yes, do that thing you just did. Whatever you just thought, think that again.
Yes. Happy thoughts. All right, so we are going to be closing up in just a minute. We have about 2 minutes left. So Denise or Jim, do you have any parting words or insight that you want to give to our people here?
Did you say no?
No, I said, I was just laughing. I was like, I don't know if I got any insight.
Jim said no. You know what, y'all, just play Shakespeare. Just play it. He's a playwright. He wrote plays for players to play. Let's all just keep playing these great works and finding, and like Jim said earlier, rebuilding the stage of theater, of American theater is where we are and what we do. Let's build this world in which we want to live. That's the idea, is that, like, if we see things that are wrong, there is no reason why we all can't work together to build the world we want to live in and work in and play in.
Hear, hear.
Here's a bastardized version of something that I really like, but I don't know if I can repeat it correctly. When you're writing a paper, sometimes to get the paper right, you've got to change this paragraph. Sometimes within the paragraph, to get that right, you've got to change this sentence. Sometimes to change that sentence, you've got to change your life to think differently. I think we've got to change our lives to think differently to make the world a better place. And I think that, as corny as it sounds, I think that the act of seeing a Shakespeare play together in a community, especially when you leave the lights on and your audience is going on the journey as part of the world of the play with the actors, man, we get to take these journeys into the human experience that teach us stuff about ourselves, teach us stuff about our society, and can make us better people. And the mere act of performing Shakespeare or going to see Shakespeare can actually make the world a better place to be. And that's what I want more of.
Yes. All right, final question. Can one desire too much of a good thing?
Every day.
No.
Never, never, never. I don't think so. We just want to say thank you guys for joining us here at NSF for this event. We would like to have more of these, and we want to hear from you, for you to let us know what you want to hear about, who you want to hear from. And as always, please check out our website, Nashville-shakes.org. I never know where I'm looking. I think I'm supposed to be looking at the dot. Check out our website. A few of our upcoming educational events are Virtual Apprentice Company 2020 Showcase. Please, please, please support these guys. August 15th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Book Club for July, The Gap of Time by Jeanette Winterson. We'll meet next Wednesday, July 29th at 7 p.m. And Book Club for August, New Boy by Tracy, am I saying Chevalier? I may be mispronouncing her name. It's based on Othello. We'll meet Wednesday, August 26th at 7 p.m. And the school at Nashville Shakes also offers online coaching and other classes, and you can also check that out on our website for all of the offerings this fall. Again, that is www.nashvilleshakes.org. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jim and Denise.
Thank you, Tamiko.
Awesome. Bye, guys.